colleagues and friends, New Zealand advocates, community advocates, and especially a number of politicians who've been so prominent in supporting the Powerhouse campaign. Our first session this morning is with the Honourable Robert Borsak, the chair of the two inquiries into the Powerhouse Museum, and we're also very pleased that the Honourable Walt Secord has also been able to join us, and Jamie Parker, MP, Honourable Jamie Parker, MP for Balmain. I'll start with a welcome to country by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to begin by just saying a few words about our chair, Honourable Robert Borsak. I first met Mr. Borsak with my colleague Dr. Lindsay Sharp, who isn't able to be here today, in his office, which is hung with the trophies of his big game hunting, and surely one of the most interesting offices in Parliament. I was looking around for the trophies in his successful campaigns against National Party MPs of recent years. Although our focus today, after our parliamentary friends have spoken, is about the unfinished business that arises from the Select Committee report, we must start by acknowledging the extraordinary impact that the work of the two inquiries has had on the museum landscape in New South Wales, and I have no doubt that we would still be campaigning for the Powerhouse Museum but for the work of these two inquiries. While it's true the Powerhouse Museum has not been saved, certainly it would have been closed by now, but for the spotlight that the inquiries shone on the government's plans to demolish, close, sell off the Powerhouse Museum in Ultimo and build a new museum in Parramatta. Our concern was never about a new museum in Parramatta. The Powerhouse Museum Alliance has always, as you know, supported cultural equity, not just for Western Sydney, but for regional New South Wales. Our concern has been that the Parramatta development has not been driven in any way by community needs or community preferences for what kind of cultural facility they want. Our connection with Mr. Borsak in that first meeting was really about his concerns with funding for museums in regional New South Wales, and as many of you know, that's been a long-standing concern of mine. So this has never just been about the Powerhouse Museum, this has been about a fair and equitable museum policy for New South Wales. I hear that the government is has a museum strategy in progress, and I look forward to seeing whether it properly acknowledges the findings of the Select Committee, which are very encouraging. I'll leave it at that and ask the Honourable Robert Borsak to now come and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. A bit hard to know where to start after working on this inquiry project for 8 years. I feel that I'm very much at a place that says to me that if I'm re-elected at the next election, I will start again.
Yes,
I think it is unfinished business. I think our reality is that, and I said it to a few of you before we started this morning, that I think this was a brain fart that came out of my bed, and he had a lot of those sorts of things going on in his head. At some stage it was handed passed to John Harlan, who had to try to make something out of it, and his love for the arts and fashion and other things frivolous took what was a very small part of the Powerhouse Museum, or the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences, when I was a boy about this high, going there to visit it all the time. And I'm not just talking about that museum, but also the Australian Museum in College Street. I used to haunt those places. That's my primary interest, that's my primary devotion to the whole thing. I can't understand, I can't countenance a process that takes a world-class technology museum, which displays everything that we represent and that our society is built on, and consigns it to a warehouse in Castle Hill and says, this is a discovery centre, come and discover something there and find it if you can. Now we all know what will happen, no one will go there, no one will go there. And the buildings in and around the very valuable property where the Powerhouse Museum, or Powerhouse Ultimo as it's called now, will be used for some sort of property development scam that the government and maybe some of their mates end up doing. Because at the end of the day, that can be the only solution. Why would anybody, apart from trying to buy votes in Parramatta, and I have no issue with regional developments, I have no issue with doing something of substance in Parramatta. That's not the issue. The issue is why destroy, why spend what will be the upwards of 1.5 to perhaps, by the time it's finished, $2 billion, and what do we actually achieve out of it? What do we achieve out of it? You know the answer to those questions, I don't. So I've taken this on as a labour of love. I acknowledge the support of Walt Secord, and I'm really sorry that he's not going to be in the next Parliament. And I'd just like to move a vote of thanks to Walt for all the support he's done. When he first came to me, when we started this 8 years ago, he said, Robert, we support what's going on in Parramatta. Or, we would like to see that occur. Labor was supportive of the whole process. But once they dug into it and realised what it was really all about, he became and was and is a passionate supporter of the Powerhouse Museum in the concepts that it was, and it will be if we get a chance after the next election. Because I think there is a chance for a phoenix to arise out of these ashes and this struggle. If you're a shooter, like I am, and having dealt with, on a daily basis, oppressive laws and being screwed over by the police just for carrying a cartridge in your pocket, you understand that it's a long-term struggle. What we're really talking about is maintaining not just the past, but it's a guide to the future. And freedom is what this is all about. It's not about short-term deals with mates. It's not about playing around with public assets and dealing with them for your own purposes. It's not the right thing to do, and it shouldn't be done. The Willow Grove House, for example, that also should not have been treated in the way that it was. And that process also was a disgrace. And now we don't know where it's going to end up. I'm sure somebody knows where it's stored, but millions and millions and millions of dollars of that particular will be spent on that particular so-called reconstruction. Of course, where does it end? Who really knows? Where does it end? I just don't know. So I'd just like to say thank you all very much for your support. There's been an absolute avalanche of information coming from all of you, from Kylie and Lindsay and everybody, and I've been I was completely flooded by it all and found it very hard to keep up. But it was only with your great support and the support of the Secretariat in the LC that we managed to take all this information, all this evidence, and make something rational out of it and produce a really good report. But we've got a long way to go yet, as far as I'm concerned. It's a struggle, and we need to put technology back in the museum and make sure that in the future, those that want to come and look at the technological past and the technological future have an easy place to access, and make sure that the tourists that come to Sydney can actually go there, because we all know how popular the old site was. We know how popular it was. So on that, thank you very much for having this forum today. I think it's a great idea, and hopefully we'll see you in the next Parliament. Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Sanders, and I have a presentation for Robert on behalf of the Powerhouse Museum Alliance. So the Powerhouse will actually never leave your walls, as it were. And more than that, this is a photo that is in the current National Trust exhibition, No Time to Spare. And Jane Stanham, who's the sort of lead curator for that, is here today. That exhibition is on display in the Annie Wyatt room up at Observatory Hill in the Trust offices. So this is the photo of the at-risk Powerhouse Museum.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Very, very nice of you. Ben Gannon, that brings back a blast from the past. I used to work with Ben Gannon once upon a time.
Wow.
He was the producer of the movie Gallipoli, associated R&R Films, Murdoch and Robert Stigwood. Yeah, anyway, there's a piece of trivia for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Borsak. Thank you, Jennifer. I should have, of course, acknowledged all of the members of the committee, Select Committee Inquiry. We especially want to remember the very fine inquisitorial work of David Shoebridge, who's now graduated to Canberra, poor man. But I can see there would have been a lot of nervous Commonwealth public servants knowing that David Shoebridge had honed his budget estimate skills here in the New South Wales Parliament. Also, of course, we've mentioned the extraordinary work of Walt Secord over 2 inquiries, and the Honourable Rose Jackson, who made some very fine contributions in this committee, in this latest committee report. I'm not sure if I should apologise for all the emails I've sent to Mr. Borsak and Paul Walt Secord, yes. I think it runs into the thousands. And when I told Walt how sorry I was that he was not standing again for Parliament, for the upper house next year, I said, well, one benefit might be that you won't get all those emails from me. Walt's just been an absolute stalwart supporter of the Powerhouse Museum. We do remember that when he joined the first inquiry, he was a supporter of the Parramatta development for all the right Labor principles, I must say. But what was truly impressive was the way he listened to the evidence, read some of our emails, and read the hundreds of submissions from all of you and others who can't be here today, and realised that we must have 2 museums, that Parramatta deserved its own cultural institution, and that we should keep the Powerhouse Museum. So welcome Walt Secord to come and say a few words.
Thank you, Kylie, for your kind words. Thank you, Robert Borsak. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we gather, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. 8 years ago, I would have never thought that I would become a part of an alliance with the Honourable Robert Borsak, Mr. David Shoebridge, and myself. 3 very, very unusual, very different people to come together. So I'll be brief, as I've given a commitment to my colleagues. That I would leave issues in their shadow ministerial portfolios to them. Oh no! That's a promise I'll keep. For those who know me, know that I've been involved in Labour politics at the municipal, state, and federal level since 1991. And of the 12 shadow ministerial portfolios I've held, Shadow Minister for the Arts and the Powerhouse Museum has been one of my greatest pleasures. The Powerhouse, as a public policy matter, holds a special place. It's been an 8-year journey, 2 inquiries. It's been a matter that's been frustrating, amusing, and surprising. Willow Grove, Ultimo, Parramatta, 3 1-in-1,000-year floods.
Yes.
Imagine that. What are the odds of that happening? The Harwood building, the steam engine, the Wren building, cost blowouts, business plans, or no business plans.
Where are they?
Secret business plans. Still waiting on business plans. The government puts more rigor in filling potholes in the country than expenditure on the Powerhouse Museum. So I was thinking about this morning and what I would say, and I thought I could talk about the project and how it's lurched from crisis to crisis, flooding 1 in 1,000 3 times, or I could talk about the people behind the push. So I decided to talk about you. So I wish to congratulate today's organizers. Your passion has been breathtaking. Your commitment has been breathtaking. And I know there's still more work to be done, but that work will be left to my colleague, John Graham, who is as passionate about the arts as I am. I also wish to pay tribute to Robert Borzak. What an extraordinary chair. You had public servants quivering. You were relentless in your pursuit of the government and getting to the truth and determining why there was not a business plan. And the pursuit of the previous Minister for the Arts, Don Harwood. Don and I were warriors across the table. There were points when I actually felt sympathy for him. And I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical when Robert would bring new material in. And I still remember when Robert came to the office and said to me, Walt, there's been a cocaine-fueled fashion week, and where they'd raised, well, actually, it actually cost them money. They lost money. I thought, you got to be making this up, Robert. But again, I should have listened to Robert. So on that note, Jennifer, Kylie, Lindsay's not here, Tom, Grace, and everyone else here who I've received your emails. I can't say that I've read, and I think it gets into the thousands because I actually created a special folder for all of them. But your commitment to this project and getting to the truth has been laser-like. In fact, I actually think that you could conduct a master's class for community groups on how to influence government policy, how to get governments to change positions on multi-billion-dollar projects. So, I know you'll do your best efforts. Now, whether it's a re-elected Parité government or a MINS government, you will hold that government to account. Now, I want to end on a personal note here, and I want to break the confidence. So at 8:55, on the way down to this meeting, I got on the lift. And who should be on the lift but the Premier? And he said, where are you off to, Walt? There's a meeting at the powerhouse. And he just slumped. He just slumped, and he said, well, I better get a briefing this afternoon. I got to find out what the bureaucrats will do. So keep up the good work. And his reaction on the elevator this morning was extraordinary. So keep up the work. You could have conducted, or you can conduct, master's classes on how to lobby and influence government oppositions. And yes, I'll do a mea culpa. At the very beginning, I said that I thought this was a good project. And in retrospect, and when the evidence rolled out, the government was clearly making it up as it was going along. So keep up the pressure. Dominic Parité is listening, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words, because I must say, we really feel like we're successful at what we do in terms of our advocacy and communications. Otherwise, why are we still here 8 years later? But that does encourage us to keep going, and we must keep going. I'd like now to welcome the Honourable Jamie Parker, who really needs no introduction. I'm sure half the people in the room live in his Balmain electorate. I'm very sad that we're losing two great museum supporters in Walt Secord and now Jamie Parker, who, as you know, is retiring at the next election. If you haven't already seen his valedictory address on the parliamentary YouTube channel, I do recommend it. It's just a wonderful description of his journey and our journey, and the power of individuals in this House to build alliances and create extraordinary change. So it's with great pleasure that I asked Jamie to come and say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so pleased to be here amongst friends. I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. This is the land of the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. It's a bit of a family reunion, isn't it, when you look around here, standing there at protests and rallies and different events and lobbying. But today I just will be speaking briefly. I just want to acknowledge the work of all of the members of those parliamentary committees, those two inquiries. Obviously, what a fantastic chair. I can't speak too highly of Robert, because the more the Greens praise him, the lower his vote will get. So, and vice versa. So we have to recognise that strange bedfellows we are, but principled and committed to a just cause. brings together a diverse range of people, and that's what we saw in this campaign. Of course, Walt, you'll be a terrible loss. Very sad to see you go. And one of the things that committee inquiry did is drew back the veil on what this was actually all about. It was originally intended as a real estate deal to assist in the pork barrelling of a marginal seat over there in Parramatta. That's what it was all about. Oh, there's a bit of land there, let's sell that, we'll make a fortune, and then we can use that to invest in trying to win the seat of Parramatta. And of course that all came undone because of the efforts of everybody here in the community. And I think one of the things that mobilised people so powerfully, and I'm sure you all felt it, was the level of disrespect to all of those people involved in museums, involved in curation, involved in history and heritage. It was such a dramatic move which really underscored the worst excesses of the coalition. And it brought together people like you, and I want to acknowledge the Friends of Ultima in particular, because we were just talking, well, there's so many, aren't there? But so many groups that came together in my electorate. As you know, my electorate, while I'm the member for Balmain, my electorate goes from Leichhardt to Ultimo, and it ends on Harris Street. So I have the TAFE side of Ultimo, and the member for Sydney has the Powerhouse side. So in effect, whenever we had a rally, we had 2 for 1, didn't we? Because we'd generally both be there supporting it. I just wanted to say where to now before I conclude in the 3 minutes that I was given, because really, as Robert and as Walt pointed out, it's an unfinished business and we need to be taking it forward in the run up to the election. As you know, we Greens are 100% behind the Alliance and all the issues that you've been raising, and will continue to press that assiduously. We know the position of the government. I'm so pleased that John Graham is here, because what we need is the position from Labor. I'm sure it'll be a good one, John. And we really want to draw that strong distinction. And I hope that a Minns government is elected, and we need, in my view, to kick the Liberals out. They've had enough, they're tired, they've been here too long. And when it comes to Powerhouse, we want a clear difference between the coalition and Labor and all those people of good conscience to make sure that when people go to the vote, they can vote for the Powerhouse. And we want that to be a really clear message. And I want to encourage you, Walt, obviously you'll be talking to John, and you've been collaborating for many years to come up with a really strong policy that can hold the Liberals to account and expose what is one of their worst, and I think publicly well-known positions of avarice and disrespect. So I think it's a great position that, that politically parties can take, but also, most importantly, that can reflect the will of the public. Because the public, it's clear, it despises these attempts to try to monetize what are, in fact, public spaces for everyone in the community. So thank you for attending. As you hear, the bells are going and Parliament is sitting, so I won't be able to stay for a long period of time. But in conclusion, I just wanted to thank every single one of you. 8 years is a labour, sometimes not of love, but it's a labour and a commitment that you've made, not just to yourselves and your professions and what you love, but also to the people of New South Wales and all those people that come to Australia. So I recommit to you that even though I won't be standing as a member, I'll still be around, I'll still be causing trouble, and I'll make sure that I continue right up to the 25th of March pressing this issue, and hope that we get a good outcome. So thank you and good morning.
Jamie, you've been a champion in the Lower House. This is also from the No Time to Spare exhibition.
Do you want to go as a protector?
Yeah.
I hope I wasn't too undiplomatic, because John was left. I was trying to be as nice as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, he did. He got out before.
It feels like it's going to get hot.
Yeah.
This is also in the No Time to Spare exhibition. This is the glorious Rand building when it opened. This is the shadow of the tower of the Sydney International Exhibition, which was the origin of the museum. And that was the entry into the Rand building. You can see the Hargrave kites, the Dalton collection, the beautiful sky that the architect Lionel Glendinning put in to open up the building at the back. Great story. Terence Measham, when he was director, the Pope visited, and we had the Mary MacKillop exhibition. We're all lined up, we're all here. Pope comes in, and Terence told Adelaide, and he said, I said to His Holiness, this reminds me so much of the Baldacchino in St. Peter's. And the Pope looked at him and said, you have a very vivid image.
That's wonderful, thank you.
Fantastic. So,
Thank you very much.
Jamie.
And David sends his best wishes to everyone. David Shoebridge, obviously he's unable to be here, but he wanted to say thank you and congratulations.
Good. Thanks very much. We've now got a series of short presentations by a number of people who've been part of this struggle for quite a while. I'd like to start by just saying, I think where we're at in terms of the community and what's driving us. About, well, August 14 actually, I took one of the fantastic locomotive 3801 trips down to Mossvale. It was amazing. The whole train was full, everyone was enjoying it. Fantastic feeling, the volunteers were wonderful, people were waiting from their cars, it had a fantastic atmosphere. On the way back, I had 100 leaflets that were headed, "The Powerhouse Museum is not saved." And I talked about in that the fact that the Premier's promise on the 4th of July 2020 has been broken. The museum was not saved, it was being morphed into a fashion and design precinct. I had pictures of the museum in all its glory, went through the fact that we had been campaigning, that what was being lost would be the breadth of the collections, that it was all being packed up, shipped off to Castle Hill. I then talked about what the current CEO had been saying, including that she would be bold and ignore the constraints of the weight of history, language and architecture. This was in a presentation to the Committee for Sydney, who of course are a business lobby group. They're not elected, but they are like the sort of people that Robert and Jamie and Walt come across, who do the influence, pay the money, hold the events, etc. I call this cancel museum culture, because that's what it is. They are cancelling the Powerhouse Museum. I talked to, I reckon, 150 people on that train, families, absolute wonderful, steam lovers, because of the raw engine of steam, the raw power, of steam. And I had the good fortune when I was at the museum to ride in the cabin of 3830 on a trip up to Gosford. And it just struck me what an incredible combination, fire and water. Look what it does. This changed the world. And this is what you could see in the Powerhouse Museum. That power changing the world, then go and look at the Voyager flying past Neptune, beaming pictures back into the space shuttle cone nose cone. This is the sort of museum that opens people's eyes, widens perspectives, looking from the tiniest piece of exquisite jewellery to the power, the majesty of the Catalina. Now, hanging that far off the floor and a centrepiece for fashion parades. When I told people this, their jaws dropped open. We thought it was safe. I said, yes, we've been lied to. We have been deceived. We were deceived. We were asked to join, come in, consult, join our master planning dialogues, join our curatorial dialogues. We were cautious, but no, this is what we want to do. We want to hear what you want to say. Totally ignored. No minutes, nothing. Just totally ignored. Lionel Glendenning, the architect, went to the master planning dialogues, worked hard with Alan Croker on a conservation management plan. he tried to contribute, put forward a program for Powerhouse Redux. We're going to 250 million, we can renew, restore, get rid of the crap, reinvigorate, revive the exhibitions, make them better, new exhibitions. No. There. Pushed to one side, not even considered. No wonder he wrote that letter to the paper and said, I'm out of it. Even now, they are ignoring his moral rights, using his drawings, his plans, his sketches, no permission sought, claiming to have him on side. The minister in the budget estimate said, oh, we have Lionel Glendinning working with us. No. This is what's happening. Recently, yesterday in fact it was, came to my email a program for the Committee for Sydney Tech Central Walking Tour. Private, members only. Listed in the program, whole morning, is the Powerhouse Museum, a presentation on fashion tech in the precinct. Right? All there. Then it goes on to walks around for the Knowledge Hub at University of Sydney, CSIRO at Everleigh, Stellar Solar at Everleigh, etc., etc. What's being ripped out of the Powerhouse Museum? Technology, science, engineering. They're building a tech central. They're ripping out the technology of the Powerhouse Museum. All that comes with it, education programs, the whole kit and caboodle. This morning, I had an email from Miles Oglethorpe. He's the president of the Committee for the Preservation of Industrial Heritage. It's an international committee. He'll be writing a letter to the Premier, as did the Newcomen Society just today. And I'll talk about that a bit later. Miles said to me, you can say today at the meeting, and they had supported all the other inquiries, which he said the discovery that the Powerhouse Museum is not saved is a hugely disappointing turn of events. Losing it by stealth doesn't make it acceptable. If anything, it feels like a betrayal of trust. He said, I sincerely hope it will be possible to pause the current proposals and consider ways of moving forward that better utilise the amazing potential of the museum. Betrayal of trust, that's what we're talking about. Not only for us and the politicians, for the people who've donated to the museum over generations, for the people who visit the museum with their families, it's a betrayal of trust. As I said to the people on that train, no civilised society destroys a museum. There was an elderly gentleman sitting just there. I thought he wasn't listening. He looked up and he said, that's the most powerful thing that you said. That's what we're fighting. We're not in the Ukraine. It's not Russia. It's our government, for God's sake. We will fight all the way. Thank you, everybody. I'll hand over to Kylie Winkworth, then we have a sequence presentation.
I really don't need to add to that. You want to be Jennifer's enemy. I was going to run through our long list of the unfinished business arising from the Select Committee report and issues that have emerged since then. I don't know that I need to do that because we're running a bit behind schedule and we want to make enough time for discussion and our Q&A. I will just reinforce what Jennifer has said, which is that the 8-year Powerhouse Museum demolition saga is completely unprecedented in the history of museums anywhere in the world, anywhere in the civilised world, that is. And it signifies a profound failure of proper process and prudent policy making in New South Wales. No government has ever sought to evict a museum from its purpose-designed buildings, which are just 34 years old, or move it out of its centrally located site to a less accessible and inferior facilities and evict the collections from the purpose-designed storage in the Harwood building to the museum's Discovery Centre at Castle Hill. And our friend Robert might say a few words about the experience of looking at the collections at Castle Hill. And are now engaged in a secret design competition where the brief has been kept hidden from the community and the museum stakeholders. But we know that this involves the demolition of the museum's heritage, the evisceration and gutting of the interior, the 1988 interiors, the demolition of the RAM building and Galleria, and the repurposing of at least some of those spaces into a 1,500-seat lyric theatre. And all this has been kept secret from the museum's supporters. There's now a huge disjunction between the replies that the Premier has made in answers to questions of budget estimates and what's actually in the EIS, because the Premier's been talking about a museum that displays science and technology, and what the EIS says that this is going to be a fashion and design and creative industry person. Those two things are not the same. So after 8 years and 2 parliamentary inquiries, this saga is, in my view, an outrageous, long-running cultural crime. It's a scandalous waste of money that could otherwise have delivered huge benefits for museums and collections around New South Wales. And it's a betrayal of the basic principles and obligations that a museum owns to its public, its stakeholders, its members, supporters, donors, and to future generations. In our society, a museum is an intergenerational commitment. It carries the prominence of permanence, and that's why that word permanent is still in the ICOM definition of a museum. Development plans need careful scrutiny and community consent because they carry long-term intergenerational costs, and that's been a large part of our deep concerns about the Parramatta development, which the Select Committee report has rightly said is more an event centre, and also about the removal of 350,000 objects and collections from accessible and purpose-designed storage in the Harwood building and in the Powerhouse Museum. The government of the day does not own the museum. Collections and museums are held in trust for current and future generations. This is why we have trustees, to protect the museum's assets and decision-making from opportunistic public pressures. The responsibility of trustees is to make wise decisions for the benefit of the whole community and for current and future generations. We've had, I think, 3 Powerhouse Trust presidents in the life of the 2 inquiries, and I know some of my colleagues here have been frank in their assessment of their role. We've certainly seen in FOI documents the way the Powerhouse Museum trustees have been bullied and lied to by public servants. The Powerhouse Museum belongs to the whole community of New South Wales. It's their taxes, our taxes, that have built the Powerhouse, and we are, and they are, the beneficial owners of the museum. Successive presidents of the MAS Trust have, in my view, failed their ethical and legal responsibilities in going along with the government's ill-conceived schemes around the museum's purpose and the disposal of its assets. And I note, in saying this, that there has been no transparent policy process to underpin these decisions. There's been no transparent consultation on their actual plans for the museum, and this is the breach of public trust, that these things are dribbling out from colleagues, from architects, from people in the know with the shortlisted architects who are now looking at how to plan the effective demolition of the Powerhouse Museum. I think is absolutely disgraceful after 8 years. We can't let this happen. It's impossible to quantify the financial, personal and professional costs and the emotional toll that this now 8-year saga has had on key people who are here today and others who are not. And I do want to acknowledge all of my colleagues from Ultimo, Tom Lockley, our partner Grace Cochrane, who keeps the wonderful news chronology and the Powerhouse Museum Alliance website up to date. And if you really want to see the ins and outs of the saga, that news chronology, which goes back to 2014, is an utter revelation. The only reason we're still going is because of our shared sense of outrage that a treasured public museum is the subject of an extended hit job started by Liz Ann McGregor and other lobbyists 8 years ago. In a civilised society, you don't let governments demolish fit-for-purpose museums and unilaterally change their remit and purpose without consultation. Families don't make donations to museums to see the government stomp all over the trust and obligations that are implicit in our gifts. The Perrottet government does not own the Powerhouse Museum, it belongs to the people of New South Wales. And the Premier's plans, and he must own those plans, not defer responsibility to the Arts Minister. Premier's plans to radically demolish and repurpose the Powerhouse Museum do not have community consent. And that's what will animate the next stage of our defence of the Powerhouse Museum. So I now want to hand over to my colleague Debbie Rudder, who I've learnt so much from about steam engines. Thank you.
Sorry, Debbie, do you mind very much if I ask Troy Wright to speak from the PSA? Because is that okay? Yeah, as it's called, this one too. I'd just like to introduce now Troy Wright, who's from the PSA. The PSA have been staunch supporters of the Powerhouse Museum, particularly of the staff of the Powerhouse Museum. And they've made a couple of great clips, those ones of you talking in front of the museum, that are fantastic. And we know how critical the staff are to the museum, trained museum professionals, whether they're the guides on the floor, the curators, the conservators. Very few of those left anymore. So thank you Troy.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. Just by way of introduction, the PSA is a union. It's a public sector union in New South Wales. We have about 40,000 members across the state. Included in that membership are members that are employed at the Art Gallery, all of our cultural institutions, the Art Gallery, the Australian Museum, the State Library, and very, very importantly for us, the Powerhouse Museum. So, as Jennifer said, we have had skin in this game for some time, and that's unapologetically. While we talk about a museum, we talk about its collections and its buildings and its artefacts and its materials. We talk about its staff, and we recognise that our members that work at the Powerhouse Museum are extremely devoted, extremely committed, and really have a big buy-in to making sure that place works. For them, what's happened in the last few years, and particularly since the announcement by Gladys Berejiklian that the Powerhouse would be saved, the ultimate assault would be saved, that was an announcement that was supposed to diffuse any uncertainty about what would happen, but for them has created great amounts of uncertainty. The subsequent 18 months to, I think you said 2020, I thought it was 2021. Has the time flown that quickly? Yeah. Okay. Well, the subsequent 2 years for them has been, mired with confusion and, generally not being sure about what's going to happen next. We have been advocating for our staff with Powerhouse Museum for many months to produce the business plan. I heard someone speak earlier that there isn't a business plan, it hasn't been publicly available. Well, industrially, the museum has a responsibility also to produce for us a change management plan. Show us industrially, consult appropriately what's going to happen. And we have been asking for that for months and months and months. Our members are still very unsure about where they'll be working in the next couple of years. They're very unsure about what they will be doing when they go there. They're very unsure about when they will be moved there. They're very unsure about when they are, if they are to be located at Castle Hill or somewhere else, what they will be doing at Castle Hill. They're very unsure about when they will return. They're very unsure about whether they'll have a right to return. Will they be going to Parramatta? Will they be going to Ultima? All of that stuff is really, really important to our members. All those, they're matters of employment, and just the fact that they're going to be stuck at Castle Hill for many, many months, if not years, is going to be a major inconvenience to them. And We have grave concerns about the powerhouse in doing this very disruptive process is going to, in that process, lose its best asset, which is a lot of those fantastic curators and professionals Jennifer alluded to earlier. We, you know, as a union, we butt up against a lot of state government departments, and a lot of the time we are arguing about this consultation point about, engage us, tell us what's going on, let us give you feedback. And a lot of the time, departments fob stuff off, it's obfuscation, it's playing a bit of a game. Our genuine concern here as a union, and our genuine observation is that the powerhouse aren't fobbing us off like a lot of their counterparts do. The powerhouse aren't just buying time or mucking around. They don't know. And there's genuine confusion, not just for our members, but for management about what this move's going to look like and how it's going to eventuate and how it's going to disrupt and what people are going to do in the meantime. One group we've got particular concerns about moving forward are our visitor service officers, because whilst curators and people like that, and even the backhouse operations people, whether it's ticketing, marketing, all that sort of stuff, whilst they will be able to transfer their job and work elsewhere, it's very unlikely VSOs can. And they are brilliant. They know the museum back to front. They are customer service, they are front and centre. They're proud of where they work and they can do a great job. They're not going to be required at Castleville. They're not going to be required at Parramatta until Parramatta gets up, which, this state government's record on building infrastructure is historically over budget and historically late. So we're not backing on there being a smooth transition from Ultimo to Parramatta for them. So we've got a large group of members, a large group of staff who are very much the front office staff, very much the people that, the public interacts with, that, we are very concerned that won't be there. And I think that'll be a tremendous loss to the powerhouse as well. This disruption, this uncertainty is manifested. The state public sector requires all its agencies to do a thing every year called the People Matters Survey, where they actually get reviews back from their staff. This year's People Matters Survey was particularly poor at the powerhouse, and really for me it's a sign of this, it's a symptom that's showing what's wrong. It's only 44% of the staff were satisfied with communication around change management, which is an appalling number, down 5% in a year. Only 33% had any confidence in their senior management, and only 30% actually believed anything would come out of the survey. They are record low numbers across the public sector, and it's endemic. It's about what's happened at the powerhouse today, and it's what's happening to the powerhouse in the next 2 years. That's from an industrial front, but our members come at this from another angle, and they are passionate about the MAAS. They love it. They work there not because it's the only job that's available to them, but for many of them it's not just a job, it's a lifestyle, it's a career. And many of you might have met our major delegate who's never allowed to speak publicly at things like this, Damien McDonald, that is a tremendous asset to that place and loves it, and many of our members do. Our members have very, very grave concerns about what Ultimo will operate like if this plan eventuates, and that's why we really encourage and support your work as a community group. Our members say level 3, I think it is, has always been dedicated towards fashion and design, and they say that's not what pulls visitors to the centre. It does not deliver, and they have grave concerns that if Ultimo site is converted to a fashion design museum, it will be terribly unsuccessful. The school groups that go in there aren't going there to look at dresses, they aren't going there to talk about fashion, they're going there to study technology. And if you remove technology from the museum, really, you're removing the guts and the heart of that museum. And they have grave concerns about the future viability of the Ultimo site if this plan eventuates. So I join you all in, we're not here to say it personally, but we have privately anyway, acknowledging the work of the committee and the tremendous work they've done over many, many years. But I'd urge you that we can't look backwards. We can't say the report's all we want to achieve. The work is now. There is a flexibility, there's an opportunity with state election, and there's a flexibility in the plan, because I don't think, certainly from our observations industrially, that what they're going to do is formatted yet. So we encourage you, we appreciate, on behalf of our members there, we appreciate your work in the community to continue the pressure and raise the profile of what is such an important state asset. And we'll keep up the battle at our end and try and support you wherever we can to keep yours up as well. Thanks for your time.
Yes, and do look out for those PSA messages, they're terrific. Now we just have a sequence of presentations, and before we launch into that, because these ones are focused on our industrial heritage, I'd like to also acknowledge the wonderful work of the Save the Powerhouse Facebook site. The best cartoons ever, and if they're not in the museum's archives somehow, then we're missing a treat. Seriously. But also, Patricia and JP, you are so on the ball. I mean, after that meeting that we had at the Ultimo Centre, which you organised, the public meeting, which the great presentations, then they're all up, they're on your site, you can see them, it's just wonderful reach, and you've been there from the very beginning. We've always needed you whenever we wanted to get the word out, and you've never said, I can't do that now, busy, no, you've been there, you've been wonderful, and the best sense of humour. I was talking 2018 with the fellow Tim Knox, who's the head of the Royal Collection Trust. He was here visiting, I'd organised a seminar, took him to the museum, and he was shocked about what was going to happen. And he said, the best attack is mocking humour, satire. And I thought of you. That's what we need more of. So thank you very much. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Debbie Rudder. Debbie was the former curator of Power Technologies. So Debbie.
I'm going to look through some of the microphones. I knew I had to do it, but when the time came, I didn't. Thank you very much. Grace, I told her to wave at me. I'd like to pay my respects to the Gadigal people, the traditional owners of this land, and I shall get down to tin tax now. Okay, this is one of the findings of the recent inquiry report. I put these official statements in blue. The New South Wales Government's current plans for Powerhouse Parramatta are more akin to the event centre than a museum. It follows that there is no plan for a science and technology museum at Parramatta, hence the science and technology exhibitions at the real Powerhouse Museum should not be trashed. Recommendation 5, the New South Wales Government outline its strategy to minimise the risk of damage, design and fragile items unused in the risk is now higher because the 3 iconic objects that were earmarked for movement to Parramatta are not wanted there. They won't fit, I think. Won't fit through the door or something like that. Instead, they'll be moved twice to Castle Hill and then back to the Powerhouse. Now these 3 objects make a very odd selection. Why were just these 3, a beam engine, a locomotive and an aeroplane, selected for the Powerhouse Museum from hundreds of internationally significant technology objects? Why no Australian-made objects? Why no Indigenous Australian technology objects? Maybe there are some other plans that we haven't heard. Now this amazing engine, you've all probably heard of it. Many of you would be very familiar with it. It is not a single lump of metal. You can't just pick it up and move it. It was made in parts and has to be moved, not in every little tiny part, but moved in parts. In this wonderful drawing, because the actual engine is so big that a photograph can't do it justice, this wonderful drawing of it in the last days at the Whitbread Brewery in London, where it worked for 102 years, you can see that it's been colorised with brown for the timber parts and blue and grey for the metal parts. That big the big overhead beam, the top there that rocks to transfer the motion from the piston to the output shaft, itself weighs 9 tonnes. It includes support beams, some are timber, some iron, plus access platforms and stairs. It was custom designed, house built, so it needs the support of a floor and a wall at great cost if the current structures are trashed. They can't just put it near the entrance to the redeveloped museum. It needs to have all those other structures with it. When Lionel, I was at the museum in the 80s, when I saw how well that engine had been treated. It's wonderful. You can walk up behind it. Obviously, there's a bit of an access problem. Not everybody can walk up to the higher levels, but for those who can, there's more of the story up there. But the way it fits into the space is amazing. Now, in the 1980s, to make this possible, it was partly dismantled and trucked from Ultimo to Castle Hill. All the parts were measured, photographed and drawn to scale. A team of experienced engineers rebuilt and tested it, partly dismantled it, trucked it to the museum, rebuilt it with all the supports plus a new floor and wall and new steam pipes, valves and drains. Not a trivial project. In the 1990s, one of the a new conservator came to me and said, despite all those careful measures taken in the project and the experienced engineers who did the work supervised by an expert from Britain, he noted that the engine was out of alignment. So another complex project was in hand. The beam was disconnected to the other parts, from the other parts. It was lifted, the attached rods were realigned, and it was lowered into place. You don't lift a 9-ton beam, like that. So the current claim that the director is making, we've moved it before, so we can move it again, it's all a breeze, that's far from correct. So the significance of this engine, it's the world's oldest rotative engine, which means it literally turned the wheels of industry. It and other engines like it increased energy efficiency, productivity and urbanisation. Huge changes in the world. With a few other engines, it created the nexus between fossil fuels and motive power. So it sits at the beginning of that graph of increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Kids get it, adults get it. Now instead we have the grand cavalcade of fashion. The engine is to be reduced to a waypoint in a trite timeline at Ultimo Fashion Facility. No more stimulation of young minds, no more discussion, understanding or interactivity. My apologies to those who love the fashion collection. Yes, it's wonderful. The fashion collection is a small part of the clothing collection, which is a small part of the textiles and textile production collection, which is a small part of the whole amazing powerhouse collection, one of the greatest in the world. But what date will they pin on the engine? Will it be 1769 when Watt took out his first engine patent? Will it be 1784 when Watt was doing all the bespoke design work for this particular engine, having new ideas during the process? Pretty important year. Will it be 1785 when the engine began working in London? Or 1836 when it reached its final form? Because that iron beam wasn't original. It was put in the 1830s. Originally there was a much different looking engine with a wooden beam and other wooden parts. I still stand by the claim that it's the world's oldest rotative engine because it had the same overall form, the same function for 102 years. But it did change during that time. We don't expect things to change in technology, to stay the same in technology. You take the current upgrades to your phone or whatever. You don't just sit there with your old Edison era phone. Now here's a recent view, pretty sad. They haven't started taking the engine out yet. They have slammed jammed, a huge white hoarding in front of it, so people can't see it very easily, can't read the labels, can't see the graphics at the front there. Somebody has kindly moved the video to face where visitors will be able to reach, but it's pretty very disrespectful. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, disrespectful. And what's behind it? I took a peek. A huge hoarding far too close to the engine, shouting at it. Zampatti Powerhouse. Now, Zampatti might have been a wonderful designer, all the rest of it, but they don't need to put something quite so close to the engine. Shame on them. And I had an international visitor with me that day, and it was pretty embarrassing. So let's move on from there to the Steam Revolution exhibition, which is also a decision was made in the 80s to feature steam in the museum rather than the whole gamut of engines and so on. But steam has proven an attractor. It links the Bolton and Watt engine to the modern world. It tells the story of how steam changed Australian life in the city and in the bush. It shows how engine design changed to make steam more useful. More compact engines for workshops, farms and ships. Multiple cylinders to improve efficiency. High-speed engines to power electricity generation. The new focus, this exhibition could easily be redeveloped. It's located in a very apt position in the engine room of Ultimo Powerhouse, which was Sydney's first public power station. The focus of the exhibition could be broadened from steam to energy just by adding internal combustion engines, electric motors, solar cells, working piezoelectric floor tiles so people can make things happen just by walking, and highly efficient electric lights and devices. Key working steam engines, including the Maudsley in particular, should remain to attract visitors and stimulate discussion. Understanding. Museums should be about opening minds, not closing them. Now, are there 3 forgotten waypoints? 3 objects have been pinged as waypoints, but the proposed fashion parade through history should not ignore 3 large and perhaps inconvenient heritage features of them. Yeah. The 2 heritage overhead cranes, bases of 2 chimneys in the boiler hall, and the crane over the turbine hall. So here we come finally to recommendation 6, that the New South Wales Government retain the Harwood building in its current form with museum-related uses. One vital use is conservation work on complex technological objects displayed at the powerhouse or the observatory. Moving this work to Castle Hill will be both risky and inefficient. Thank you for your attention. And I can look at how to turn it off. Jennifer, can you turn it off? Do you know how to do that?
I said I'm not a tech.
little accent.
Ah, there's that. Thank you. This is a great. How could you think of something as basic as that?
Debbie has co-authored the definitive paper on the Vulcan Watt engine with Emeritus Professor David Miller. Really important. If you want it.
In retirement, as I'm still doing, writing about objects.
Yes.
And
Now I'd
Troy
like
said
to
you can't
invite
get it out of your blood.
Ian Devenon to speak briefly about the Catalina. Thanks, Ian.
I don't have a visual aid for my presentation. This sort of was thrown at me this morning. So I just want to start off with a bit of a self-indulgent personal note. I came to the museum as a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer with an honours degree in history and a postgraduate diploma in museum studies. My first job at the museum was really to supervise the restoration to steam of the Maudsley beam engine, which is in the steam revolution now and operates for the benefit of the visiting public. So it was a bit disturbing to hear a senior member of the Powerhouse Museum staff recently, as a result of what was coming out in the inquiry regarding the movement of the Maudsley beam engine from the museum to a private individual's building down in Goulburn, where it had come from after its arrival in Australia and operated at Goulburn. But transferring such a valuable object to a person's private situation is not good museum policy. And anyway, I spoke against that in the inquiry, and Andrew Grant here, my colleague of long standing, also spoke against that. And the senior member of Powerhouse staff basically turned around and said they don't know what they're talking about. Well, I think it's a member of staff who doesn't know what he's talking about. He wasn't involved in any of the restoration. He didn't know what the metallurgy was like or anything like that. And this is the sort of attitude that I find is coming out.
To be fair, he has written a book on children's mathematical word puzzles.
All right.
So he is qualified.
Okay. That's it's nice to know that he's qualified. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, my association with the museum not only goes back 30 years to when I started in 1980 before the opening of the Powerhouse, but it goes even further. I have an uncle who was an assistant botanist at the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences, so probably from the age of 3, my father would take me in to meet with his brother and have lunch with him and things like that, and I had the benefit of going down to the basement and being sat on the horse-drawn busts. And when I was a teenager, I used to go into town on my own and go into his laboratory where he worked, and he would set me down with a Bunsen burner and a glass tube or two, and I'd been and have a lot of fun. The museum was a part of my growing up, and my 3 children have grown up with me working in the museum, and my 7 grandchildren have been introduced to the museum as well, thankfully, and hopefully they'll be able to go back as they grow older. But to get to the Catalina, now they've recently opened an exhibition on the Catalina, as you're probably aware. It's been lowered to the floor almost, and it's now very vulnerable to touching movement by the visitors, which is a dangerous thing, really. Although it's an aircraft, it looks sturdy. It's not. It's rather fragile. There's fabric covering of certain control surfaces, the trailing edges of the wings, and they're not really that vulnerable to people touching them because they're out of the height. But it's just that it's been moved out of its prime position with the air conditioning down to a lower position, and you know, it's a bit of a worry for me. But the point that I would like to make is that the museum doesn't know what they want to do with it. They've got the president of the Aviation Historical Society, which was a society involved with the museum over a long period of time, to be the advisor of what to do with the Catalina. And he's been looking at 3 potential locations for it, which shows that they've got no forward planning in this process to how they're going to handle these objects. It's not just pack them up, take them apart, pack them up and send them to Castle Hill. They really don't know what they're doing. And the 3 locations that they've thought of putting this, the Catalina, and one is with HARS, the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society, down on Shell Harbour Airport. The other is at Rathmines, where Catalinas were historically located, and there is a restoration of a Catalina occurring up there. And the third one was perhaps in a hangar out at Bankstown Airport. Now, the president, I'm the secretary of HARS, by the way, and the president has told me that he's no way he wants Frigate 2 down at HARS. They have a lot of aircraft there. They can't get all of them in the hangars. The hangar 3, which is the largest of the hangars, doesn't have doors. It's currently got a bird ingress problem. So it's troubling for the active aircraft there. Rathmines has no undercover storage at all, and the location where it would be is on a private property, which is very close to Australia's largest salt lagoon. Now, sailing environment is an unfortunate thing for an aircraft like the Catalina, because they were never made to last long. They were expendable items, and the aluminium alloy they're made of is a copper aluminium alloy, which acts in high humidities like a little battery, and it just corrodes it away. And we have in storage at Castle Hill some of the material that was taken from the Catalina during its restoration process, and there are just holes with little blue spots of copper chloride. And so that's the bit I want to stress. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know about it. I'm fortunate that I know the president of the Aviation Historical Society quite well, and he does talk to me. And I was actually very surprised to be invited along to the opening of the Catalina exhibition, because I thought I was persona non grata. Don't ask people that know. So I've been given a wind up. So thank you for listening.
That's very sobering, very important information, and thanks very much. Now I'd like to introduce Andrew Grant, former Senior Director of Transport. After that, Robert Hannon will speak from the Australiana Society, and then Tom Lockley. We have allowed for 30 minutes of a sort of panel discussion. That will obviously be a little bit shorter, remembering that we need to leave this room by 11.
Thanks, Jennifer. As Jennifer knows, I have two presentations, but I'm only going to bore you with one at this stage, and if I have the opportunity to present the other one later, I will, but otherwise, the purpose of this is to, that's interesting, that's not going to, doesn't matter I think for the presentation, but it's not going to full screen. I thought it was important that I give some time and attention to the Boiler House exhibitions, with which Ian and I are very familiar, and all of you who've worked at the museum for a number of years will also be very familiar. And I thought I'd say something this morning that I don't believe has been mentioned in papers, submissions or public events, or evidence to the inquiry perhaps, unless my memory fails me. So essentially it's about a building and its relationship to the collections displayed in the building, in this case the Powerhouse Museum. I recall Lionel Glendenning once saying that the walls of the Boiler House conformed to the pleasing proportions of the so-called golden mean or golden ratio, identified in ancient Greece, as some of you will know if you've done study in this area, as the divine proportion. This architectural device probably contributed to the innate reaction of the millions of visitors who have gasped at the remarkable setting for the transport and space exhibitions in the Powerhouse. As we know, these signature exhibitions are currently in the process of complete removal, with no plan to renew them. This is, of course, an egregious breach of faith with the general public, who expect a new generation of the Powerhouse Museum, also featuring its much-loved collections. The notable exception in the Boiler House is the Catalina flying boat, which, as we've heard from Ian, just now, has its own issues and its own problems that are not being well managed. But we're assured it'll be returned for permanent display. I'll just say this about the Catalina. The current dilemma about where to safely move and store this very impressive aircraft for several years, mind you, until the Powerhouse is ready to receive it again, supposedly, is emblematic of the host of problems that are yet to come following the decision to completely remove the collections from the museum. That's my prediction. There will be a host of other problems. This is just the vanguard of a whole range of other problems. It's evident that none of this has been thought through, as Ian has already said about the Catalina. And no wonder, because there are no specialist staff in the museum with knowledge of the transport and engineering collections or how to safely move them. This is a process of attrition that's happened over the last 10 years, but particularly over the last 5. And none of those, Ian and myself included, who have left the museum have in any way been replaced, and the expertise has been lost. But of course, it's available if they cared to ask us. As Ian's already said, I think anyone over 60 is persona non grata. Is that right, Ian? Yeah. And certainly those with grey hair. I'd like to break just for a moment to acknowledge, while I have the opportunity, the presence of my local member, the Honourable Tim James. I don't want to embarrass him, but he's the sole member of the government to accept the invitation to be here at this seminar today. I'd like to say on behalf of Jennifer Sanders and myself, who've been to see Tim, at my request of Tim was to have Jennifer accompany me because she's not living in the same electorate, but in good faith and with good cheer, Tim entertained us at his office and was very gracious and very receptive to the arguments that we put about the reasons for our great concern. And I want to say that because we need to retain a dialogue with government at all points in this process. We've been given little opportunity to do so without being either ignored or taken for granted. And a comment I'll make in a moment will further that impression in terms of my last local member, who was the former Premier. I'll say no more lest I get myself in trouble, but thank you, Tim, for being here today. So that's the situation with the Catalina. If we had the expertise, we'd be pleased to have it used, and it's not even called upon from the very willing availability of our time and comments on this, financial assist and so on. However, it's plainly apparent that this episode with the Catalina is among a slew of incompetent collection management decisions associated with the government's obsession to destroy the Powerhouse Museum. And it's bound to place the collection to be removed from the museum at unnecessary risk. I'd like to share with you some images that I took as photographs to a meeting with my then local member, the former Premier Gladys Berejiklian, on the 15th of September 2017. There's reasons I remember that date. I was accompanied then by Jennifer, who can attest to the defensive wall of resistance we faced and the dismissive response we received when we tried to explain a constructive win-win scenario in a written form that was tossed aside, as Jennifer's already referred to, with another proposal. We genuinely thought this proposal that Jennifer carried to the meeting could achieve the government's objective for a new museum in Western Sydney, and yet could also genuinely save the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo, and at much less cost. The photographs were to illustrate the wonderful exhibition volume of the Boiler House and its fitting industrial heritage, compared with, as I wanted to argue, the less impressive equivalent museum spaces in several UK museums that I just visited. I planned to leave the photos with Ms. Berejiklian, but her mood was such that I didn't even manage to show them to her. Perhaps you'll be a more receptive audience, so here they are. That picture you're familiar with, that's the Boiler House display as it was a couple of years ago. It's not looking like that now. You know where the Catalina sits now, close to the floor. That's the flight gallery in the Museum of Science and Industry in London. The best they can do is to create something that looks as if it needs more head height. I think you'll agree that things are crammed in there. And that's one of the world's leading museums of science and industry. That's the Ulster Transport and Folk Museum in Northern Ireland. They have constructed purpose-built hangar-like structures to contain the transport collection. And again, you'll see there's no happy marriage of architecture and collection. Likewise, in one of the old halls of the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh, the aircraft are making their way in a gingerly fashion between two elevated galleries. The viewing galleries are great, but the space is cramped. Now, this is the last example of a recent structure dating from about 2012, the Riverside Museum in Glasgow, which is a transport museum on the Clyde River. It was a wonderful design by the architect Zaha Hadid, and it's a world famous museum design that's been extremely well patronised and visited since its opening. And you'll see in a moment the inside, the internal space. The building is just wonderful. But the spaces are less than inspiring in the way that the transport collection has been managed and displayed there. Now, that's the pictures that I hoped to show the former Premier, but I didn't get to. There's some background to the success of the Powerhouse exhibitions lying in the carefully coordinated planning of the museum. Now, some of you will be well aware of this. This is just my take on one of the main reasons why the Boiler House exhibitions were, I'll say are, so impressive. The architectural approach to the project provided spaces that respond flexibly to the vastly differing scale and nature of the museum's collections. Just think about this, the different nature and scale of the collections. This was done by establishing a clear and hierarchical relationship between the buildings, the exhibition contents, and the environments created to best interpret them. Specifically, the grand volume of the Boiler House would complement the awe-inspiring sweep of suspended aircraft and spacecraft. The preserved cranes and the tiled floor of the former engine house would evoke a former industrial setting for the activated engines of the steam gallery that Debbie was referring to. The diverse perspectives and alluring sightlines of the turbine house would complement the visual appeal and eclecticism of the social history displays, and the intimate exhibition spaces of the switch house would enrich the visitor's experience of contemplation and engagement with the stunning decorative arts collections. Now, that's my personal take, but I think there's probably some resonance with those of you who experienced that in the first couple of decades of the museum's history. At the same time, great care was taken to respect the former Powerhouse buildings, despite the loss of so much of the internal structure and the finishes from the derelict interior. The architect and the designers worked closely with the museum to maximise the relationship between building and collection, between exhibit and space, and between object and its immediate context. That's the kind of thinking and planning that went into the Powerhouse. The exhibition design approach, the specification of building services, the relative scale and proportion of exhibits, and the spaces considered in a hierarchy all reflected this integrated approach. This process demonstrates the intrinsic inseparability of the Powerhouse Museum buildings from the collection that they house. This resulted in a museum that attracted international acclaim, surely a great source of pride. What a pity that the government and the museum management would find this irrelevant and of no interest given their current plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome, Mr. James. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. I'm sorry I have to.
No, I can hear the bells, yeah. I'll just invite Robert Hannon. Did you want to say something this morning?
I'm happy to. I don't wish to.
Yeah, no, do.
Well, just very, very quickly. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry, I've been sitting at the back and present for about 25 minutes or so. Compelling presentations, particularly on the steam engine and the Catalina. My grandfather worked on the Catalinas during the war, and look, I don't know all of the history and background. I'm a humble backbencher of 8 months standing in the electorate of Willoughby, but I do understand the respect where you're coming from. Andrew came in and really made strong and persuasive arguments, and I want you to know I am taking those up with the Minister, Ben Franklin. We're seeking a meeting with the Minister, and there are other things, Andrew, that we'll talk about that I hope we can pursue. And please know I'll always listen. I hope that I can make a difference here, because I think that what you're standing up for is right. And I wish you well, and thank you for taking the time. Please excuse me, I'm very sorry, I must return to the chamber. Good to see you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James has interacted with members of the email group, so we've got contact.
All right.
Thank
Good
you,
to see
sir.
you. Thanks for having me. Thanks very much. See you.
I'd now like to introduce Robert Hannon. Robert brings a different perspective. He's the chair of the New South Wales Committee of the Australiana Society, one of the very first affiliated societies with the museum. I remember when it was founded in John Wade's office back in the Old Technological Museum. So I'll just hand over to Robert. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just find the my PowerPoint.
Not me. Where's the technical?
Oh, fantastic.
Very good at it.
That will do. Perfect. Yes, actually, Jennifer mentioned John Wade. He's actually still the editor of our magazine, our quarterly magazine, 4-colour, 60 pages per quarter. So he's still there, still involved, sleeves rolled up, and sends his regards.
Yeah, great.
So with the Australiana Society, it started in 1978. We are made up of antique dealers, historians, curatorial museum staff, applied arts and science. And it all started from the Applied Arts and Sciences or the Powerhouse back in 1978. We are passionate about researching, preserving and collecting Australia's heritage. We have approximately 490 members, which is made up of curators, antique dealers and researchers, historians and enthusiasts, and going strong. We publish, as I said, the 60-page magazine. We flourish from an annual fee. The Australiana Society is run by volunteers. The New South Wales branch decided in November 2021 to try to arrange an inspection and discussion group at the Discovery Centre, Castle Hill, based on a selected range of items. We first contacted the Powerhouse on the 23rd of November 2021. Over a period of time, we managed to negotiate a suitable date for the event being Saturday the 22nd of October 2022. So they had plenty of time to organise 25-30 items to be pulled out of pallet racking and out of boxes and shelving so that we could see them at eyesight and have a discussion group with our leading experts in their field to analyse and talk about these items. On a Sunday in May 2022, I drove to the Discovery Centre in desperation because we were not receiving any cooperation on this project. Weeks would go by and multiple emails and phone calls would be unanswered, and when we received a response, we would not receive a direct answer to those initial inquiries. So it just dragged on. On the 9th of the 10th, 2022, we wrote directly to Lisa Havilah, CEO, because we were still not receiving answers that satisfied our concerns. So this was 2 weeks out. We still did not know what was going to be pulled out. We could not organise with our own internal curatorial staff or researchers and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, these items are going to be on the floor. We need you out there so that you can talk to the rest of the group and explain to us why these items are so important to all of us. From that letter to Lisa, we received an immediate response that the staff would be in contact shortly, which they were, but by this stage it was 10 days prior to the viewing. We did not have confidence that we did not know what to expect on the day. It took over 10 months for approximately 30 items to be brought out of storage. On the day, it became obvious to many who had not been to the Castle Hill Discovery Centre that the centre is not close to public transport, not close to any other tourist destinations. Access off the corner of Windsor and Showground Road is dangerous. The gates were closed when we arrived, and the driveway was full with 6 cars, and more cars queuing out onto the road, creating a traffic hazard. I had to stand there and wave people off and I had the phone number of everyone that was participating, and I was phoning them saying, please park around the corner, it is too dangerous to stop on Showground Road, you're going to kill yourself or somebody else. We were told that carpooling, the gates were, the phone number on there was a phone number on the gate, so we phoned that number, and it was a security guard in Ultimo. And he said, well, I'm in Ultimo, there's nothing I can do about it. Once inside, the lighting in the shed was poor. The aisle where the furniture was put on the ground for us to view, the space was very limited. Disability access into Shed J was difficult and took several attempts to manoeuvre a person and wheelchair through the door. So humiliating for that person, but also embarrassing for us, and completely unacceptable in this day and age. We were told to carpool because parking on site is limited. Short-staffed, limited knowledge, and morale was low, and quite obvious from all the comments coming to us from the staff, and we didn't even encourage that conversation because we didn't want to have it. We wanted to get on with the day. Comments by staff off the record were made about the lack of resources, museum curatorial staffing levels are low, those who have been employed in the recent times have qualifications in gallery management and not museum management. The curatorial knowledge of the items in the collection is being lost. And they were the comments that were fed to us directly on the day. When Ultimo Powerhouse closes at the end of next year, once the apparent top secret Leo Schofield exhibition comes to a close and the staff are forced to move to Castle Hill Discovery Centre, many of the staff have indicated that they will leave because travelling to Castle Hill is not practical, despite the offer or the consideration that the Powerhouse might be putting on a courtesy bus between this train station and Castle Hill. Well, forget the staff, what about the people that want to visit it? Staff did not want to talk about Parramatta, and we're told that they knew very little of the new site, except from what they'd read in the papers. In the process of arranging the above day event in 2022 at the Discovery Centre, we're aware that the Powerhouse was running a series of focus groups with affiliated groups such as the Silver Society and the Ceramic Collector Society of New South Wales. The last discussion group was on the 19th of March 22, and the Australiana Society was not invited to anything. In a response from we hadn't even spoken out, so we weren't even on the nose at that stage. In a response from my letter to Lisa Hadler, I was notified by a senior member of staff that our affiliation had been put on hold. I was assured that I should not be disappointed because the affiliation with all groups had been put on hold, so I don't feel quite so bad after all. These are organisations that have members who are experts in their chosen field, who in the past have worked collaborative on research projects, exhibitions, and donated time, donated valuable objects, like given the valuable items to the Powerhouse, didn't even send them off to an auction house or put them on eBay. There was no answer why the affiliations have been put on hold or how long, and why had none of the many organisations not been notified and still haven't. The day was a success. We're very grateful to the staff and friends who work at the Powerhouse, but we know what they are going through. We all left feeling deflated for what our world-class collection and renowned museum has become. Further to the above, a recent research document to be published in our magazine forced a 2-week delay in publishing due to the lack of cooperation from the Powerhouse. An arranged visit to an exhibition called Eucalyptusdom at the Powerhouse was also fraught with issues due to the lack of response to our previous correspondence for that visit. I have spoken to many like-minded organisations, and as much as they are distressed by the situation, they are also not willing to speak up for the fear of retribution.
Yeah.
The Powerhouse Museum must not only be kept in its present form, it must be enhanced with a far more comprehensive permanent collection with an extensive representation of Australian decorative arts, increase in staffing with the appropriate qualifications in museum standards and excellence. The 1980s award-winning Rand building and the historically important Harwood building must not be demolished. And now I just want to show you this image of the Macquarie Chair 1821, which is mahogany, cedar, casuarina with a more recent kangaroo fur. it's one of two. There is a third one, but it was made later, and that's at St James. The second one's at Macquarie University. It's probably one of our most important cultural and decorative items that we have. And this is and it should be on permanent display. And there it is in all its glory. What extraordinary respect we're showing to that item. It's an absolute disgrace. Yep, and then the lighting in the sheds. We're reduced to using our mobile phones as torches to look at the items, and I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. That's a very lively presentation. Thank you very much. We just have a very short note from Tom.
Indeed.
We have to be out of here by 5 to 11.
I've kind of dragged to the bare bones. I was a teacher for 43 years, all levels, all places, many roles. I am a newcomer as a volunteer, only 14 years, about a year full-time on the floor, interactions with about 20,000 people or more. A couple of quick comments. We've been deeply involved with the idea of affiliated groups, but the idea of having people who know something is not popular. At Castle Hill, there are wonderful engineers, artists, craftsmen, and they are being ignored and shut out. Enough said. I do look back to with nostalgia at the time about 10 years ago when there were often 600 or more people in the museum, school time, holiday times, and a wonderful atmosphere. The young educators rushing around in astronauts' outfits inspiring the children. The CSOs, great, there's some wonderful people there. The curators when they hit the floor. The volunteers, not just the oldies like me, but the young interns, some of them are absolutely remarkable. And I just want to quickly underline the fact that we've got Meg Stevenson, who knows more about the museum than anyone, and more about its exhibits than anyone. She's 95, and she's always surrounded by people learning. Hetty Mollimer, former chief engineer for 3M, has made 5 touch tables, which are by far better than anything produced by the others. Okay, these days are wonderful legacies for the museum. Sun Tzu, the military tactician, says, reinforce your strengths. This government is destroying them. The elevated viewing platform and the display cabinets were brutally and unprofessionally ripped out in early 2020 because they didn't meet fire regulations. We have asked for those fire regulations to be promulgated. I wonder why they're not. Another topic. All museums have permanent displays and temporary displays. We're going to have only temporary displays. And, I mean, if I say the Louvre, everybody say one word. Mona Lisa, exactly. And if you said Powerhouse Museum, the one word would probably be Baldwin Watt. No chance. All great museums need that mix. We have done it. Eucalyptusdom. I'm going to talk briefly about the degradation of science. Eucalyptusdom. A celebration of Australia's cultural history and ever-changing relationship with the gum tree. Wonderful artworks, but no mention at all of the groundbreaking work that was done in the 1900s by the museum. I know I'm preaching to the converted, so I'll move on. I want to mention Australian democracy, of which I used to be very proud. My staff used to always say, oh, he's always taking excursions to Canberra. I remember one time with a group from Wiley Park, and one of the women suddenly in the gallery of the Federal Parliament burst into tears. And I was worried and I said, what's the problem? And she was a refugee with a horrific background, and she said, I am in the Parliament of my new country. I've never been prouder. I have never been more ashamed of Australian democracy than I am at the moment in New South Wales. Violent, ignorant, authoritarian lack of due process that we've seen over the last 8 years. We've got to fight it. We're fighting to preserve our heritage, to say nothing of a mere $250 million. We owe it to our past generations to preserve their legacy. Good than that. We owe it to our future generations to make it available for them. The email group of my email group, I don't want to be vain, but I collect information from all sorts of people and put out and put out fact sheets. There are some on the sheets only, on the stairs, on the sheet. Stop rushing me. On the chairs. Okay. Only one between two. If you want to become a member of the email group, email me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tom. You had the hardest task of all, so thank you very much. We need to wrap up. If you look at your two documents, there are key demands listed on the last page of the document headed, the extinction of the Powerhouse Museum. What we'd like to, I'm not going to read them out, they're all there, they're all fantastically important because our demands will mean that the Powerhouse Museum is renewed for the people of New South Wales. I would like this group to agree to those demands because we will promulgate those in our media releases as coming from the Powerhouse Museum Alliance on behalf of the people of New South Wales. Can you speed read them if you haven't yet? All good? So thank you everybody for coming. I'll ask for a show of hands to agree to those demands crafted by the wonderful Kylie Winkworth. All happy? Yes.
2 hands.
2 hands, 6 hands. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. We will be doing more events. We will be contacting and being in touch with more media. I and Kylie are so proud of everybody supporting the museum. Thank you everyone.